Buenos días, amigos, compadres, colegas, y bienvenidos a George Washington University. I'm Frank Sesno. I'm the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs here. I work closely with Sean Aday, Professor Sean Aday, who's the director of the Institute of Public Diplomacy and Global Communication, which together with the State Department and Sister Cities International is sponsoring this morning's and today's discussion. So welcome to you all, and let's get the blood flowing. Can you just give one another a great round of applause? I always like to front-load the enthusiasm just to make sure everybody's on the same page. These are incredibly exciting times, and we are really thrilled to be hosting the conversation as we are at the threshold of a new era between the United States and Cuba and the relationship between them, building bridges through exchanges, which is critical, which is what you do. And it is really what this morning is all about. It would be nice if we could build more bridges in the world and destroy fewer bridges. At GW, we're really excited about this event. And through our students and our faculty, it's one way that we work to help strengthen ties between the U.S. and the rest of the world. We look forward to working to strengthen ties and exchanges between the United States and Cuba. We have students who are already working on research and other projects related to Cuba as the two countries enter this new era. Tengo muchas ganas de visitar Cuba y conocer la cultura y la gente y ver cómo estos intercambios y las relaciones con los Estados Unidos van a promover el cambio, ojalá, y la democracia. I'd like to shout out a couple of people before I introduce our first speaker and our guiding force for the day. First, I mentioned Professor Sean Aday, who has been an incredible leader of the Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communication and has been instrumental in putting this day together. So, Sean, thank you very much. I'd also like to call out a special friend who I just had an opportunity and pleasure to chat with a little bit, and that's Ambassador Mark Taplin. Mark, where are you? Where? Oh, all the way over. Mark is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy now. He was the Public Diplomacy Fellow who was visiting with us for a couple of years, 2008 to 2010. Is that right? Time flies, and we're delighted to have you back. Evan Ryan is Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs and is responsible for programs that engage youth, students, educators, actors, athletes, all sorts of types. More than 1 million people this program has touched over the years as it promotes exchanges and understanding and builds bridges. As a journalist and someone who's been in too many areas of conflict, also covered stories about development and humanitarian assistance, diplomacy, and politics, there is always a difference when you're dealing with someone who has had experience in an exchange like this as opposed to someone who is just doing their job and knows only their own culture or does not know our culture. So at a time of virtual everything, it seems to me ECA is real and it makes a difference. It's about people learning and understanding other people and other cultures. And at this time, as we try to build these bridges with Cuba, there is nothing that's going to make a bigger difference than these bridges at this time. And everyone I have spoken to is anxious to go to Cuba and start building. How many in the room are interested in going to Cuba? Okay, I thought every hand was supposed to go up, but it did. Let me introduce Evan Ryan. She served at the White House with the Clinton Global Initiative on presidential and senatorial campaigns. She is committed to public service, learning, engagement, and building bridges. Evan.
Thank you, Frank, for that kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. Government officials and leaders really like to step up to a podium and say, with great solemnity, this is an historic moment. Well, that phrase is entirely justified where Cuba is concerned. This is not only an historic moment, it is the kind of historic moment that comes along once in a lifetime. For half a century, relations between the United States and Cuba have been caught in the paradigm of the Cold War, frozen in amber, as Secretary Kerry said in Havana last month at the reopening of our embassy. But that is changing. The reestablishment of diplomatic relations announced by President Obama on December 17, 2014, and the easing of some restrictions on trade and travel open a door to exploring a new relationship and creating a new paradigm to define relations between the United States and Cuba, and between the American people and Cuban people. As President Obama said back in December, neither the American nor Cuban people are well served by a rigid policy that is rooted in events that took place before most of us were even born. And there are already signs of positive change. We are encouraged that travel from the United States to Cuba has increased. We are encouraged that more and more U.S. companies are exploring opportunities in Cuba. We are encouraged because Americans and Cubans need to engage. We need to learn about each other, rebuild trust, and develop a new relationship between our peoples. We need to help Cubans connect to the world where they can obtain the knowledge, skills, and networks that they can use to improve their lives. I believe that people-to-people exchanges have a unique and critical role to play in this effort. We want to have a more normal relationship with Cuba, not just diplomatically, but across the board. What could be more normal than having more Americans and Cubans, neighbors long separated by far more than the 90 miles of water, finally come together on a regular basis in every walk of life? Exchanges allow us to engage other people face to face, appreciate the valuable contributions that each individual can make, learn about each other's differences, and find ways to build bridges where gaps exist, just as Frank mentioned. Exchanges break down barriers that separate people of goodwill. Exchanges build connections that engage and empower people and that motivate people to become leaders and thinkers, to use their skills or develop new ones, and to find connections that can improve their communities. We are confronted with serious challenges in the modern world, challenges of physical security, resource scarcity, food security, environmental change, and growing populations. We're not going to be able to meet these challenges alone. We need to bring people together, their knowledge, their experience, to build partnerships through which we can all work together. I also believe that government isn't the primary motor of this change, because the truth is that it's more than government to government. It's about scientist to scientist, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, artist to artist, and student to student. These are the relationships that will drive us forward into an era of greater mutual understanding. ECA's exchange programs are famous, it is true, but they represent a fraction of cultural, academic, and professional exchanges in the world. The organizations that you all represent are by far the greater engine of this effort to build networks of people who can find ways to live constructively and cooperatively together. I want to underline that I see this as just the beginning of a long and rich dialogue. I would actually say several long and rich dialogues between our governments, between our peoples, and between everyone in this room. This should be only the beginning of the dialogue on our relations with Cuba among the U.S. community of academic and cultural organizations and government agencies. As we go forward, I hope that the contacts established here today form the basis of a network of experience that will help all of your organizations understand the programmatic and operational environment in Cuba. So I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for the great work that you do and for your commitment to working with us on this relationship. I want to again thank our wonderful partners in putting on this event, George Washington University, and I want to thank Sean as well. I want to thank Sister Cities International, Those of you here who have worked with Sister Cities International know how deeply committed they are to building bridges across borders. I'm always struck by their energy and enthusiasm, so it's no surprise they were eager to be a part of this event today. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce to you President and CEO of Sister Cities International, Mary Kane.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Ryan. I can't tell you how much we appreciate our relationship with the State Department. It has been going on for many, many years, and it has been a resource that we completely depend upon. And after 5 decades of closed doors between our two countries, the U.S. and Cuba, it is no surprise that following the thaw in these relations and recent opening of embassies, that Sister Cities International has received an influx of inquiries from U.S. cities seeking Cuban sister cities, angling to be the first with a Cuban city, sister city. And I have to tell you, one poor town in Illinois actually published and sent out a press release that they were going to have the very first Cuban sister city. So when the paper called us, we had to tell them there were actually 9 other ones already in place. However, what surprises many is that the already 9 partnerships in place, some of which have spanned decades, have been implementing cooperative exchanges ranging from music and culture to humanitarian relief to educational exchanges through the persistence and creativity of their residents. Although US-Cuba diplomacy is just getting restarted at the national level, over the past 5 decades, subnational citizen diplomacy has cultivated many ties between communities in both countries. The concept of citizen diplomacy, that citizens have the right, if not the responsibility, to help shape foreign relations, is a helpful reminder that diplomacy does not begin and end at the federal level. People-to-people exchange has always been an essential first step to building mutual understanding and respect between nations and their citizens. As we have seen time and time again in the years since Sister Cities was founded, governments and even countries come and go, but cities and their people remain. Only the continuity of relationships at the community level will ensure stability in the long-term international relations. Starting with Germany and Japan after World War II, Sister Cities International began facilitating relationships between cities in the U.S. and cities abroad in order to perform cultural, educational, technical, humanitarian, and business exchanges. Launched as a major presidential initiative by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1956, actually on the steps of the American Red Cross on September 11, 1956. Sister Cities International's mission is premised on the idea that by forming these community-led relationships, people from different countries and cultures would learn from one another and develop mutually beneficial ties that lessen the chance of new international conflicts. Today, there are 545 cities in the United States with over 2,100 sister city partnerships in 145 countries spanning 6 continents. And since President Eisenhower inaugurated this program, every president of the United States has been the honorary chairman of Sister Cities International, including President Barack Obama, who stated in his letter of acceptance of this position that the increasing interconnectivity of nations in today's global economy underscores the need for robust partnerships between communities around the world. Organizations like Sister Cities International foster such relationships, increase mutual knowledge and understanding between cities and cultures. These collaborations promote trust among citizens and nations, create opportunities for technological and economic innovation and development, and lay the foundations for continued peace and prosperity. Now, the very first U.S.-Cuban sister city partnership was initiated between Mobile, Alabama, and Havana, Cuba in 1998. Since then, exchanges, some of which took place outside of the U.S. and Cuba, have been conducted between these two communities, and their programs have ranged from medical supply donations and disaster relief to cultural awareness and university exchanges. One particularly active program is Boulder, Colorado, and their sister city in Cuba, whose activities have included sponsoring the delivery of medical supplies and equipment, renovating community libraries, and protecting endangered species in eastern Cuba. And after the normalization of ties in late 2014, the Boulder, Cuba Sister City Organization president, Spencer Havlick, remarked, "Our visits over the years are not tourism per se, but rather people-to-people interactions. It's kind of like the Berlin Wall coming down in Latin America." And now that barriers to interaction and travel have begun to break down further, U.S. citizens are looking forward to expanding exchanges and cooperation and their commitment to maintaining contact, even during the bad old days of U.S.-Cuba relations, has helped build trust and respect that will pay dividends in the future. We've already seen the benefits of citizen diplomacy in our relationships with Japan and Germany. And sister city relationships, they really work. And since 1959, 199 communities in the U.S. have established sister cities with Japan. Less than 1 month ago, the city of Nagaoka, Japan, brought the famous fireworks to Pearl Harbor to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II in the Pacific. Just think about that. That was only 70 years ago. And yet, here they are coming together, and through these relationships, putting aside those hurt feelings. Nagaoka and their sister city, Honolulu, along with the U.S. Navy and Hawaii, jointly hosted the historic 70 Years of Peace commemorative event on historic Ford Island at Joint Base Pearl Harbor. And 119 U.S. cities have partnered with their counterparts in Germany. Wishing to set an example to symbolize peace and the ending of a horrific war, the city of Hagerstown, Maryland, and Wessel, Germany, formally joined hands as sister cities by public proclamation on March 10, 1952, actually 4 years before we were started, and that was one of the impetuses that Eisenhower saw that this actually worked. These cities have continued to share this affiliation for the past 63 years, and somehow, as they celebrate August Oktoberfest in Maryland and Oktoberfest in Germany, many children and adults would not believe that 70 years ago we were engaged in a world war. The closeness of our nations has no doubt been helped by official diplomatic channels, numerous trade deals and treaties, but the slow and steady cultivation of these allies was most aided by the millions of interactions by everyday citizens representing their own views and their own communities. This is why opportunities to work, study, travel, and interact with citizens in countries that are our nominal adversaries are so critical, whether it's Cuba, Iran, Russia, or another country with whom our ties are strained. As Eisenhower said, we need to work out not one method, but thousands of methods by which people can gradually learn a little bit more of each other. How do we dispel ignorance? How do we present our own case? How do we strengthen friendships? And how do we learn of others? These are the problems that we have, and once we start handling those, we can move forward. And once we realize that we all have families we love, and children that we want to have a better life, and that we love our own countries and heritage, we don't seem so divided after all. We are delighted that the political leaders have finally reinitiated official contact between Cuba and the U.S., and we are looking forward to building more people-to-people relationships with our neighbors in Cuba.